the creep's legs and swung up with his elbow, hitting the punk in the throat and causing him to fall over his leg. The hood was gasping to get wind down his windpipe from that blow. The three other hoods circled around the furious Newtin. "You just got lucky, you balding fart," shouted the muscular blonde hood. He quickly gave Newtin 3 very rapid punches across the face, making Sheena and Shirley cry, "Newtin, Daddy!" at the same time. So hard were the fast 3 punches that Newtin was staggered back, then hit across the back of the head by the hood behind him. Jeff closed his eyes, acting like he was so drugged that he didn't know what was going on. Newtin was dazed, but he realized that his head was a sitting duck to the powerful young blonde, so he quickly dove to the floor out of Fisk's way, rolled onto the floor and swung his leg about with fury and kicked out, making contact with the side of the blonde's leg as his leg snapped in two at the knee. "Ah!" he yelled. Newtin then suddenly jumped up on his hands and kicked the blonde in the face, kicking him up against the wall. He hit the floor unconscious. The 2 others charged in on Newtin. Newtin crouched down and bounded off the floor, making contact with the hood's faces with his elbows. One of the hoods hit the floor unconscious, but the one that got the left elbow to the face just looked murderously angry with a broken nose. He was a very big, powerful, muscle-bound oaf who seemed immune to pain. He snatched Newtin up in his arms and tossed Newtin at the wall, shattering the lamp. He then grabbed Newtin by the arm and sent him crashing up over the TV set. Sparks shot out over the floor, and Newtin yelled out in pain as his foot made contact with the wiring. Shirley ran in and tried to stop the hood from inflicting more damage on Newtin, but her fists and kicks didn't even faze the creep. The creep knocked her out with one punch. "Damn you!" shouted Newtin with insane fury. He quickly ducked and dodged the oaf's punches and blocked his kicks, then quickly gave the oaf a strong, fast 1-2 across its face. The oaf blinked its eyes and charged at Newtin again. Newtin quickly ducked and dodged it and gave it another fast 1-2 across its face again. Newton's punches still didn't have any effect on it. Newtin then ran into the kitchen, and just as the hood was about to snatch Newtin up in its arms, Newtin bashed a metal skillet on its head. That had an effect. The powerful oaf staggered back dazed into the hallway. Newtin was going to use the frying pan again, but was afraid it would kill the guy, so he started giving the brute fast 1-2s across the face again, plus 1-2s to the midsection also. Another 1-2 sent the oaf staggering about into the living room with a cross-eyed expression on his face. Newtin measured the distance of the oaf's face, then spun around and kicked him on the side of the jaw with his ankle. "Bullseye!" "Bullseye!" said Jeff, acting drunk as Newton's foot made hard, fast contact with the jaw. The oaf, who weighed about 280, landed on one of the hoods, who was almost regaining consciousness. When the hoodlum finally recovered, Newtin had a metal pipe in his hands and was in a karate position. "Get out of my house and don't ever return. Get out of my house and don't ever return," he said, trying to control his fury. "And Jeff, why don't you join your masters, since they're the ones who have power over you?" Jeff looked depressed. One of the hoods quickly showed his teeth and shouted, "You haven't heard the last of us." "Me too," shouted another hood as they walked to the door. Newtin quickly jumped up off the floor and kicked the threatening hood in the back of the head, causing his head to make a loud popping sound when it made contact with the door. "Then you won't hear the last of me," smiled Newtin evilly. Newtin quickly bashed one of the hoods on the side of the head with the pipe when he made a move at him. When the hood came to, When the hoods came to, they all left. Newton then resumed work on his spaceship, and Jeff asked forgiveness for acting so stupid. Newton and his family forgave him. This next story I'm about to read to you is called the Odysseus Syndrome. The days continued on, followed by weeks, months, and years. Newton and Sheena had just finished their 20th wedding anniversary and were now on Sardana for 20 years. It was now 20 years of Sardana life. Things were going well with the Brancos. Sheena looked like an old lady in her 70s. Newton was looking more and more like a bald 40-year-old. Jeff was an alcoholic janitor, and poor Shirley was a pitiful, rotund-looking 40-year-old weighing close to 400 pounds and very lonely with no friends. The poor girl just sat around the house dreaming of Mr. Right, but realized that it was hopeless being in her condition. The sad, faded girl just sat around the house crying a lot of the time. "Why don't you get a job?" her parents would ask. She would, but she was so depressed that she wouldn't be able to hold a job. She hated work because everyone was so ever young, good-looking, and happy. Newton would just sit in his seat and cry when she'd cry. "I'm sorry," he'd say when she complained about being born. Jeff managed to move out of the house. He actually found a girl he thought he might be able to live with. The girl was definitely no beauty queen, but she did seem to be perfect wife material. It wasn't long until Jeff married the 60-year-old Sardonian woman who looked 30, and they moved away from Newton and his house. They ended up living 500 miles away in another part of the country. Sheena and Newton were sad to see Jeff leave, especially Shirley. It was Jeff that Shirley would tell her problems to. They were very close, and now that Jeff was gone, Shirley really went to pieces. "You can tell me your problems. You can tell your problems to me, Shirley," said Newton to his little girl. Newton later wished he didn't, because Shirley's depression was so heavy that Newton found himself hitting the sauce. What made them even more depressing, what made things even more depressing for Newton was when he noticed that Sheena was starting to get forgetful. Newton and Shirley noticed more and more that Sheena would often forget that she was cooking something and that it would be burned. When Newton and Shirley would bring it up to her attention, Sheena would often snap at them and blame her forgetfulness on them. Newton would find himself arguing with Sheena a lot. One night, while Newton was trying to sleep, Sheena started getting fresh with him. She wanted sex. Newton would say, "You know, the water of Sardana has made me impotent for the past 10 years. Newton lied, not wanting to tell her the real reason why he didn't want sex. Sheena told him that she felt him while he was sleeping and that he wasn't impotent. Caught in his lie, Newton tried to think of another lie to keep her from freaking out, being that Newton didn't think she was attractive now. I'm ugly, that's it. I'm old and ugly, and you don't love me anymore," she started screaming in a raspy, hurt voice. "I do love you, I do," shouted Newton. You don't. I'm some repulsive, ugly hag to you now. And have been for the past decade. You don't love me anymore," she cried. Newton hugged her. He did love her, but he definitely didn't love her in the physical sense. Newton turned out the lights and tried to, but the feel of sags and wrinkles kept him impotent. Thoughts of suicide began to travel through his mind. That and mercy killing. A few weeks later, when Newton got a day off to work on his spaceship, he walked up to it but for some reason didn't have a heart to continue building it. What if questions began to go through his mind. He thought, what if I can get this ship off the ground and get rescued by the Federation so she naturally can stop aging, but what if they don't have a technique to reverse this damned aging process? But they can't reverse it, he wondered. Newton then thought it was stupid to continue building on the craft because why have Sheena go through eternity as a decrepit old lady? And why have Shirley go through it as a fat, depressed lady in her 40s? Newton then thought, this ship, this craft, I built a little too late. Too slowly. Newton began to think that death would be the only kindness to him and his family. He sat down by the door of his garage and felt nothing but despair. Then he saw the pretty, voluptuous girl who was now living in Nabob's house playing with her young, good-looking boyfriend on the lawn. Newton started feeling jealous and envious. The way they laughed and giggled as they played made Newton feel as though he was missing out on the good life. His body was about to turn 40 and he felt the tug of middle-age crazy yanking on his arm. More days went by, more weeks and months, then Newton's body would hit 40. More days went by, more weeks and months, then Newton's body hit 42. Hitting the big 40 wasn't a fun day. More days went by, more weeks and months, then Newton's body hit 40. Hitting the big 40 wasn't a fun day. On the last night of being physically 39, Newton became bombed and had a terrific hangover. Shirley and Jeff's pregnant wife sang happy birthday to Newton as Newton sat at the table with an ice pack on his head. Everyone knew Newton was killing himself. Everyone knew Newton was feeling horrible. Sheena smiled and started singing "Happy Birthday" again. We just sang it, my dear, said Newton, feeling grouchy. We just sang it. Sheena smiled and looked about. Everyone became depressed to realize that Sheena was getting senile. Matt, would you like some cake? She asked Jeff. I'm Jeff, Mom, said Jeff. Oh, yeah, okay. Sheena would say, as if she were a parrot, moving her head like an old hen. Jeff then whispered into Newton's ear, gosh, she's really getting stupid. Shut up, shouted the hurt Newton. And then they started arguing. Newton couldn't take it any longer and quickly escaped from his house. It was a hot summer-like day as Newton zoomed off on his motorcycle. Newton gassed it up and ran it as fast as he could on the outskirts of town. He drove it until he didn't have much gas left. Then he'd return home. Forgive me for my behavior, he shouted to his family, who were angry at him for deciding that for deserting them deserting them with Sheena. Newton then promised them that he'd never do anything as immature as that again, and that he'd never put Sheena into a home, but would take care of her until the day she died. After that, Newton stepped into his spaceship, sat down on the leathered bucket seat at a control panel, and played a cassette tape. Something new on Sardana that Newton was getting the money for saying it was his invention. Newton put a cassette tape into the tape recorder that fitted well on the control panel of his spaceship. When the music played, Newton found himself getting super depressed because the music he was listening to was the music that he and Sheena heard on the radio when they went on their honeymoon several years ago. The music took Newton back to the brief, short time, which was the last time Newton and Sheena ever had together. The music made Newton yearn for that time, plus it also made him realize just how fast time was passing him and Sheena. Newton quickly turned off the nostalgic music and tried to think of other things to keep the wonderful past from haunting him. How I wish I could turn back the clock, thought Newton, realizing the bleakness that was soon coming. A few days later, Newton found himself in a bar getting drunk again. No one was paying attention to him, but Newton was telling the drunkards who sat by him that, as a mutant, he never realized just how horrible being a living, feeling, human-type being was. I never imagined just how blessed I was being a mutant, he said. I literally I take that back. I destroyed heaven to live in hell. That's it. After swinging down something that tasted like tequila, Newton put his hand on his toupee and said, "You know, I don't really feel sorry for myself. I have lived, I have seen everything, I have done everything as a man could have ever done, and then some. I have seen sun. Oh yeah. You know, I don't really feel sorry for myself. I have lived, I have seen everything. I've done everything as a man could have done, and then some. I have seen suns and giant stars explode. I have been able to fly by the powers of my mind and have won all my battles against the worst of enemies. I have lost and regained, and I always came out ahead. And it really seemed like a guiding force was behind me. Now I'm human. Newton looked at a pretty whore that was dancing with some John. You know, it's funny. When I was at the top, I was really blind to what it was like being a human. Now that I'm human, I realize that I was a lot better off as a mutant, because as a mutant, I didn't feel. My pain is boredom. Now, since I feel, I realize that the tragedy of life isn't boredom, but the fact that we humans have feelings. Having feelings to love and care about others and yourself is a curse because, you know, nothing gets better with time. My wife is getting senile now. I used to feel sorry for her, but, you know, if she continues to get worse, maybe that's a blessing. Because she won't love or have the desire to be loved. Newton then started looking lustfully at the pretty whore. She came up and started talking sexually with Newton. Newton then found himself walking out the door with the whore. Newton found himself walking out the door with her when his hand uncontrollably pulled out a high amount of money. As he walked out the door, a man with glassy eyes and dark hair walked up to the bartender and asked. That man was saying something about him once being a mutant, about seeing stars and suns exploding. So, said the bartender, a lot of people start talking about things after a few swigs of sodash. The man, who seemed interested in Newton, pulled out a picture of Branko. The Branko in the picture was an aged version showing the way Newton might look 5 years from now, because the picture of the Branko clone was totally bald on top plus wrinkled. Who's the average old man? Asked the bartender. The man said, we think this is the person who attacked Sardana. Newton? Interrupted the bartender. Yes, Newton. We think Newton is alive and well on Sardana and living in a body that now has a face that looks like this. Have you ever seen this man before? Asked the man. Newton had never been in this bar before without a wig, so the bartender said that he hadn't. Are you a bounty hunter? Asked the bartender. Yes, and he attacked my planet also. I've been sent to search out and take him back to my planet for execution. And the man walked out the door. Huh, said the bartender. That guy's drunk and he didn't drink anything. As the man walked about through the streets, looking bald man in the face to see if they were Newton and the four were in a hotel room. The prostitute took off her clothes and started getting fresh with Newton. Newton started feeling and petting her as the minutes went by. As the minutes went by, the more he found it hard to control himself. Right when he started taking his clothes off, his toupee fell off, making the horror laugh at him. Newton felt really embarrassed and humiliated. He was so nervous that he was so nervous that it caused his head to sweat, and that made his wig fall off. Don't laugh at me, said Newton. He went over to the window and looked out to get a breath of fresh air. The whore then walked up to him and started kissing him, telling him that she thought the baldness was sexy. Newton fell for her lies and started kissing back. But right when he was about to commit adultery with the whore, Sheena's sad, crying face went through his mind. I'm sorry, I can't do it, he said, and he started getting dressed. Are you queer? She asked. I'm a Christian. Also, I'm married. Do you have a good sex life with your wife? She asked. No, said Newton. The horse started looking sexy again. Right when Newton was about to untie his shoes again, the bounty hunter who was interested in him kicked down the door and pointed a ray gun at Newton. Newton had his toupee on again. Take off the hair, he ordered. Newton refused and asked, Who are you? I do as I say, Newton. Newton? Asked Newton. The man quickly walked up to Newton and yanked off Newton's toupee with lightning-fast speed. The man then stepped back and pulled out a communication device and said, Cabacto. I'm here. I have found the Newton. Good, said Cabacto on the audio. Give me the coordinates to where you are located. When the bounty hunter started to, Newton quickly made a run for the door. The man quickly tackled Newton onto the floor. The man quickly lifted Newton up off the floor and tossed Newton 10 feet through the air, making the horse scream and Newton hit the wall with a crash. Right when Newton was about to regain his senses, the man got him by the other arm and flung him clear across the room and up against the other wall. When Newton came to, he noticed that his nose was broken with blood coming out of it again. Not again. Blood coming out of it. Not again, Newton groaned as he felt his nose. He staggered up off the floor as the man began to read the area coordinates to the mysterious Cabacto. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, causing the man to pull out his weapon and point it at the area of the noise. Newton quickly kicked the weapon out of the man's hand, causing the weapon to shoot out a burst of light that made the door explode and kill the person who was knocking. The horse screamed in terror. Newton quickly jumped onto the